and I didn't even have a passport. And it's a funny story. I got a little excited and I bought the ticket before I had my passport, so, which is not a good idea. Moving abroad was the right decision for me. In my 20s, I would say I really kind of had a misspent youth. You know, I didn't really get out a lot. I spent a lot of time um, kind of just at home, bit of an introvert, while many of my friends actually got out and went to parties um, and just, lived it up at that time, which I think is kind of what you're supposed to be doing at that time in your life. And even at the time, I kind of knew that maybe I would regret not getting out as much, but I didn't have the mental energy back then to really be that outgoing. So I spent most of my time just alone by myself at home, and I had friends, but again, I just didn't really go out that much. I didn't spend that much time hanging out with them, and so I had that feeling of lost time, and I think that really played into the reasoning of my decision to live in another country. Didn't really experience enough, and so I had this yearning to see what was out there. And the way that it all happened was that my school was, had a lot of international students, and so there were people from all around the world, and I heard stories about where they were from, and it kind of like piqued my interest about what it might be like in another country, So I hung out with people this one summer, and then all of a sudden, like, they were going back home to visit, where they're from, and one of them was from Japan. So they were like, I'm going to visit my family, and all of a sudden I didn't have anything to do, and I just was very curious about what Japan might be like. And before that, I hadn't really thought about it, and I really didn't know that much about Japan. I didn't really have a clear image of what the cities and whatnot even looked like. So I toyed with the idea of coming to Japan, and I found a way to make that happen. Now, they had already come back to Japan, and I hadn't yet. I hadn't caught up with them yet. And I didn't even have a passport. And it's a funny story. I got a little excited and I bought the ticket before I had my passport, so, which is not a good idea. But I was able to get an emergency passport. So you just pay a little bit extra money and they will like expedite that process for you. So I got my passport just in time, like maybe a week or less before my flight was going to take off. And I think people didn't really expect that I was going to be able to pull it off. And I wasn't even sure. I was kind of sweating it there. But anyway, so I came and visited Japan for the first time. And, that in and of itself is a whole story. But that's how I got my first introduction to, really being in another country and got a taste for it. And I got to thinking, man, I really didn't do enough, especially in my early 20s. I just, the time just went by and I didn't do much. So I started thinking about how life is short and how I want to make the most of it. Really, experience is the only thing we have in life. So if you're feeling short on experience, you're feeling short on like life. There's no right way, but you just got to choose the path that's best for you. You'll always be able to think, oh, but if I do that, then this thing, or oh, that'll mean I can't do this, or whatever the con might be. So I felt like there'll always be reasons to not do something, but that was kind of how I led my life just prior to that, right? I wasn't really going out. I could think of reasons not to do it. So I thought that if I continued to think that way, I would never go anywhere. So I didn't really think that I wanted to wait any longer. But in reality, I had made several trips to Japan before I actually moved. So it ended up being actually quite a bit longer. But so I wasn't one of those people who just like, made the decision on the spot and everything changed from that moment. Not quite. It kind of happened over time. It was never a passing feeling about like thinking about living in another country, it was something that that just kept kind of gnawing at me, you know? And so it's interesting because many people decide to move abroad for two main reasons. There's two main, well, categorically two types of reasons. So, you know, there's the pushes and the pulls, right? You may have heard this before, but if you haven't, a push is kind of what it sounds like. So there are some reasons that there are some things that will make you feel like you can't stay somewhere. You know, so for example, if the place where you live, and this was true for me, it got too expensive, you know, a lot of engineers and whatnot were moving into my hometown. And so that caused the housing prices to skyrocket and things were just getting ridiculously expensive. So that would be considered a push. That was, and for me, that was a push. That was the thing that I kept thinking, you know, I'm not an engineer. But I live in this area and the housing is it's really expensive. That being said, that didn't mean that I had to move to another country, right? I could have just moved to some other part of the state or even the country. But you know, I had these pulls, and I would say that the pulls were much stronger. I think in my case, like if you have a lot of things that you feel are pushes, then that I think pushes are very strong. You almost don't have a choice with pushes, but there were just more pulls. You know, so Japan is a very safe place. Japan is a very convenient place. It's a very fun place. There's always things to do, and on and on and on and on. And you can ask many foreign residents here the list of reasons why they chose to live here and still do, and they can give you a lengthy one, I'm sure. Yeah, so really it was like with everything getting more expensive, it was like I was going to have to eventually move away anyway. And so my preference was just to see what it was like to live in another country. Challenges notwithstanding, right? So it's not like you move abroad and everything is happily ever after. I mean, there are going to be, of course, things that you don't agree with, just things being done differently. And if you watched my previous video, if not, please do. But I talk about, you know, one of the greatest challenges is being away from friends and family, being far away, right? So of course that's a big factor. If I could do it all over again, I would choose to live abroad. I would do it all over again. And as a matter of fact, I would do this even sooner than I did it. I was in my 30s when I moved abroad, you know, and I really wish that I would have been in my 20s. That would have been a lot more fun. You know, when you're in your 20s, you just have a lot less to consider, to be worried about. And I think that being able, well, one thing, an obvious thing to me is just that I would have been able to eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And yes, I do eat a lot of good stuff, but I have to kind of be more mindful of that being a little older, you know, and it's going to depend on your genetics and all that too. But like, you know, there's bakeries everywhere. I'll make more videos talking about just the ridiculousness of food in this, delicious food in this country. But it's just, you know, there's this whole thing about like, do Americans eat more and larger portions? But and I'll go into all that in another video. There's reasons why it can actually be hard not to eat too much, even in Japan. And it's not the portion size, but there are other factors. But yeah, I wish I were younger when I moved here. I think it would have been a lot more fun, you know. And then it's just kind of like where you have more endurance, like your batteries last longer, if you will. You know, not that I feel like I don't have. It's not like a lot changed, but I feel, yeah, there's a difference. You know, like I'm not 20. You know, and you feel that. When you're out and about just trying to go and go and go. So if you're in your 20s and you're thinking about moving to Japan, like this is going to be the best time. It's never going to be better than that, I think. Having said that, moving here older is still cool too. It's still a lot of fun. So if you're older, like don't be discouraged in any way. because it's still a lot of fun and it can still work out really, really well for you. Ultimately, there are trade-offs, right? For myself, I decided it was worth it. So I wouldn't take it back. And as I said, I only wish that I could have done it a little sooner, right? But, life circumstances and whatnot led me to wait a little bit longer. It was worth it to me to live a life less lived, because most people don't ever get a chance to live abroad or actually do it. I don't have any regrets about moving here and living abroad. It's not always all good, it's not always easy, but ultimately, I absolutely am happy with my decision. And I would do it again. It's good. I'm happy with what I did. And so, thank you for watching. And if you'd like to do this again sometime, consider subscribing so we can meet in the next one.